Have you ever seen something by night? Are you always ready for losing the fight? Have you ever stood outnumbered by locals? Was it too much girls? Freedom, good job for freedom. Your mind is free, but your body is still down. Things got so wrong so fast. So wrong so fast. We down if we were at his place.
So, hello everyone. Sorry about the audio there. I hope everything's working now. I see we have 35 people watching right now. I'm going to introduce you to Phil, who goes by the nickname That Dang Dad. He's a former police officer from the United States. And I'll put him through. And I thought it would be interesting G'day, Phil. I thought it would be interesting for an ex-crim, for an ex-prisoner to be speaking with an ex-cop. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Phil. I go by That Dang Dad on YouTube or That Dang Phil on Twitter. Started doing a YouTube channel a couple years ago when my daughter was born. I was just up late at night, doing nothing. And I happened to be an ex-police officer, but I didn't, like to talk about it because everybody hates cops now for good reason. And but during the 2020 George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter things that were happening as a result of some high-profile police killings, I was like, I should say something. I don't know. I should say something about it. So I started to make videos about my experiences being a police officer, and I started getting into police and prison abolition, and met a lot of nice people through Thought Slime and some other YouTube creators.
Through what? Oh, that's a name.
Yeah, Thought Slime. He's a anarchist YouTube creator.
Yeah, cool.
And so and Jock and I were on a stream a couple days ago, and now we're here.
Yeah, I just thought it would be a really good dichotomy, me and you together. Okay, there's a guy commenting now. His name is Martin. We are in, I don't know, Martin, do you want me to tell everybody where we met? So there's a guy there. A lot of people don't get his humor because people don't know that we're friends. Probably I'm his only friend. Come on, Martin, tell everybody I'm your only friend. So me and Martin, let's just say we spent time together. And he's on there commenting saying, don't speak with him, he's a psycho. Referring to me. I just thought it would be a really good dichotomy between me and you. And I thought also that I would have an insight into some questions that we would have for former police, or for police that acting police officers wouldn't answer. And so just before we start, the band, if the audio was working this time, the band's name is Pleasure Trap. I believe they're based in Poland, and the name of the song is Freedom to Jock for Freeman. It was written and recorded when I was still in prison, I believe last year. So my first question is, and this was the question that I sent you to kind of explain to you my idea for our conversation. It is, in my experience, cops and criminals have a lot in common. What is your experience and opinion about this? And then not only in terms of crime, but do serving police become friends with some of the criminals that they are involved with?
Yeah, so your question reminded me of a story when I was on training. I had been a cop for, 6 months, and I had a training officer. I had to follow them around and do everything that they said. And one night we did a raid on a gang house. So there's a gang that sold drugs and guns and stuff. We did a raid and we arrested 5 or 6 people. And it was a bunch of like young, low-level guys, and then what we called the shot caller, or the, kind of the head guy, who was like a veteran. So he was like an older gangster. He was in his mid-30s. All the guys were in their teens and early 20s. And while we were in the jail booking them, I remember the old training officer that I was with and the old gangster like reminiscing about the good old days together and about how these young kids don't know anything anymore, and it's so hard to train up these
They just
youngsters.
don't commit crimes like they used to.
Yeah, it's just, it ain't the same. But I remember that they were so like in sync with each other and like just vibing on each other and stuff like that. And it really stood out to me. I was like, wow, I guess we're not so different, you and I guess. But yeah, I think part of being a police officer, at least where I was at in a pretty low income area, is, you spend all your time with the people in the community. You spend all your time in these places that don't have a lot of resources, that are looked down upon and things like that. And so you're part of that same community that has all of the problems that lead to crime and lead to desperation and things like that. And you get to see it, I guess, from that other side, where it's not random to us because we're there and we're part of the community. And so I think a definite understanding starts to happen. I wouldn't say police officers are always like take that understanding and use it to build empathy, but yeah, it's when you work in a hard part of town, I guess you start to understand what people who commit crimes are going through. And I think a lot of our gang detectives, they would try to build up a rapport with the gangsters in town so that they could, get information out of them and things like that. And it's really hard to sit and chat with somebody for hours in a week and not build some kind of like understanding of what they're going through and build some kind and share. I mean, like share your feelings with each other, I guess. And so,
Yeah.
But I also think that the other side of your question is that I think a lot of cops get used to not following the rules because we've got a badge and we've got a gun and we can do whatever we want. And so, we run stop signs and we park places you're not allowed to park because we can do it in our cop car, and we boss people around and push them around. And so, yeah, we get used to that power rush of being unaccountable.
Those are some of the most famous photos of, police abuse of power, is police parking wherever the hell they want.
Yeah. And so that builds over time where you start to go, oh yeah, right, I can park here. No one's going to write me a ticket. And then that builds and it builds. And if you're the kind of person that gets sucked into other things, it becomes very easy to talk yourself in and go, oh, well, I'm just going to do that. Well, hey, who's it going to hurt? And then all of a sudden you get cops dealing drugs or worse,
No, illegal parking is definitely a gateway crime.
Gateway drug. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, we've got our first real question, unlike the constructive criticisms of Martin. So it's from Georgi Dimitrov, and it's in Bulgarian. And I'll just translate it for you, because Phil, I presume you're not up to date on your Bulgarian language, right?
Very low level, yeah. Very.
Okay, all right, no worries. So Georgi Dimitrov has asked, Phil, have you? And we're going straight into the deep end here. You probably got this question before. Phil, have you participated in a shooting? And how did it end? If you participated, if you were personally involved in a shooting.
I've been involved in a few scenarios where another officer with me shot somebody. I have never shot anybody. Never fired my gun on duty, luckily. But yeah, we had an incident where somebody was what I now recognize as having a mental health crisis. But at the time, this guy was fighting with his family, got in his car, and was driving in a parking lot all crazy. And he drove too close to one of our officers, and the officer thought he was going to run him over and shot him through the window. That guy lived, and nothing ever happened to the cop. But I've been on a couple things that were pretty high intensity, but yeah, I've never killed anybody, never shot anybody.
I think more. I mean, he doesn't exclude. He doesn't specify you shooting. He asks if you've participated in a shooting. So maybe you were just standing around or something, or maybe you don't want to speak about that.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's even for the city that I worked, that was very busy and had lots of drugs and guns and things like that. Shootings were pretty rare for us, so I can think of maybe 2 incidents where I was involved, but not, didn't pull the trigger or anything like that. I was never part of a shooting that was deemed inappropriate or unjustified.
Yeah, well, I think not many police are involved in such shootings because they're always
that's
deemed justified.
yeah, maybe more a problem with the system than an endorsement of what we're doing. But
Yeah,
it's actually pretty rare.
Yeah, I guess it depends which area in the United States, because but basically that question is going to be pretty common, especially for people outside of America, because very often the only time when America comes on the news, apart from some trade wars with China, and Trump going crazy on Twitter, is when some police in America are just murdering people and it gets filmed on. Someone films it, or I mean, one of the most horrifying police murders I saw was when they shot that guy in the hotel room with an automatic, and I remember some of the memes after. It was like the Twister meme of police orders. It was like, put your hands up, put your hands down, put your hands up, kneel on the floor, roll over, do a somersault. And this guy is just begging not to be shot, and the guy just kills him. And I mean, for me, I think one of the explanations, from what I understood, is that, and I know this from a little bit of experience for when I was for a short time in the army, is that a lot of police are probably using cocaine and amphetamines. So what's your experience about that? And if you did, if you have, experienced or seen other police using these types of stimulants, steroids as well, how do you think it affected their judgment when they were doing their job?
Yeah, I can honestly say I've never seen a cop use methamphetamine or cocaine on duty. Not to say they did it, but I never saw it. But steroids, definitely. I knew a lot of guys that used steroids. A lot of guys would try to work out before their shifts so that they could get their little muscle pump going in there. I mean, this is pathetic. I knew guys that would tailor their uniform.
Are they injecting or using pills? Everything.
I don't know.
Okay.
I never got into steroids, luckily, so I have no idea how they're used. The ones
I
knew,
in prison, they're very popular.
Yeah, but yeah, I knew guys that would tailor their uniforms to be extra tight around around their biceps so that they could flex it, like just pathetic. But yeah, there were. I worked with one cop in particular who was on steroids a lot, and he was out of control when an incident would escalate. He would just lose his shit and get super mad, and he'd start screaming at everybody. He'd want to fight everybody. He would threaten to fight other cops. He would get all wound up, and it was totally out of control. And he almost got fired several times, and then finally got fired because he beat up his girlfriend and barricaded himself in his house when the SWAT team came to get them out and tried to fight the SWAT team. So that is what finally got him fired.
So how many were in the SWAT team?
I don't know. I wasn't there for that one, but
I mean,
usually
like
they
roughly.
4 or 5. Yeah. 4 to 5, 4 to 6, whatever it was. But,
Yeah, he probably had a chance.
yeah, he thought he did. But yeah, it's what happens is, so for despite what you see on the news, shootings at any one police department are pretty rare, and so guys get really stressed out and really wound up, and like they don't know what to do. They don't know how to like de-escalate themselves.
Yeah,
And so that's when you see things like a cop going, "Oh, get your hands up, sit down, stand up, sit down, shit." Like they go into a freak out mode and they don't know what to do. And so of course the other person doesn't know how to like comply with them.
yeah.
And that's how shootings happen.
I saw a really good comment. It was in America. Someone commented, maybe it was a Facebook meme or whatever, or one of those tweets that gets copied into a meme. But somebody said something like, "Why are civilians expected to stay calm and comply when trained police officers can't even stay calm when they're doing their job?" Like that's the point of why they're there, because they're supposed to be the professionals in high stress situations, and very often they are more freaked out than the guy who's just saying, "Look, I'm complying, just relax, man, just don't shoot me." And the guy's like, "Do this, do that."
Yeah, the best, as much as I'm a police abolitionist and all that, like some of the best cops that I worked with had that calm under pressure, and they're like, all right, everybody, let's relax. And they would pull other officers back and go, all right, dude, you're getting a little worked up. Let's go over here. And there were guys that were really concerned about peace and de-escalation,
And
but
would
they
you
were
say,
rare.
in my experience in Australia, they are the older police?
Yeah.
Not
It's
the
the
younger
old
ones.
veterans that they've seen it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is not definitely like the younger cops think that every situation is the end of the world, and so they hyper overreact. And the older cops are like, this is definitely not even on the top 100 worst things that could be happening right now.
Well, and when you're young, you in law enforcement, you're always trying to prove yourself and prove that you're tough and prove that you've got what it takes to do the, and so there's a lot of bravado and machismo that you sort of performatively go harder than you need to because you want to show that you can do it.
That's definitely a toxic masculinity problem for all of us young men. We've got lots of questions, so I better get back to questions because apparently we don't have time for my questions. So here, this is in English, obviously. Would Phil comment on white supremacy fascist infiltration of the police? And Deliana is currently in America, so she's in the belly of the beast together with you, Phil.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because in American news media, every 6 months a story will come out. Police officer found to be part of the KKK, and I can't believe it. And the question always comes up: oh, are white supremacist groups infiltrating law enforcement? And the answer is no. A lot of cops are just racist and join white supremacist groups. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's not. It's not a plot. There's just a lot of overlapping interest.
Absolutely, yeah. Great answer, yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't personally know. I did not personally know any officers that I know for certain were part of those groups. But I worked in a city that was predominantly Hispanic. And so every once in a while, a white supremacist gang would come through town, start some trouble.
Why would they do that? Why are they doing that? Like on a bike run or something? A poker run or what? Why are they going through town?
Either to buy drugs or on their way somewhere else. They would buy drugs and stuff like that. Guys would get out on parole, and so they would have drug contacts in the city. But they were still white. It's, I don't know how it is in Bulgaria, but in California where I worked.
Oh, here the police sell the drugs. So
okay, perfect. Yeah. You might, as a white guy, you might go into prison and join a white supremacist gang in prison, even though you don't necessarily care yourself about that. It's like, well, I got to hook up with these guys to stay safe. And then when you get back out, you don't carry those beliefs out of prison. It's just when you're in prison, you're a white supremacist. When you leave, you just like And so
I had a lot of that, not gang affiliations, but I had a lot of that bullshit making me crazy. And when I was in prison, people, I would say to somebody, "Why the hell are you doing this or doing that?" And they'd say, "Oh, here is prison. That's what you do." I'm like,
yeah,
"No, you didn't walk through a magical door when you
yeah,
walked into the prison and you changed you changed something. You're the same
right,
person as you were when you were outside. Just the prison doesn't change who you are." Anyway, continue,
right.
please.
But yeah, so what would happen is, we would stop a car with a bunch of skinheads, or we would, there'd be some white guys getting in a fight, and they would see me as a white officer, and they would just assume that I was on their side in any incident. They would just assume that I was like, they would always be like, this guy knows what's up. This guy knows how it is. Like, they would always bring me in. I go, hey, dude, I hate you way more than I hate, these gangsters or whatever. Because I was
Yeah,
always very anti-racist, stuff like that, even when I was a cop. But
yeah.
um, but yeah, they just assumed that we were all part of the same team. So I would say, yes, there's definitely a lot of overlap between law enforcement and white supremacist gangs. Not an infiltration, just they both like the same things.
Yeah, so that's very important to make to make that difference, because there's lots of conspiracy theories out there that there are groups who are doing these types of things in an organized way, and really what you're saying is that it's more it's not so organized. It's just more natural.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. If you join the
Yeah,
cops, you get to beat up black people. Like,
yeah,
why?
that's
Why?
it.
You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like,
okay, all right.
now that's not to say that there might not be. I'm not saying there isn't an organized effort. There doesn't
Yeah,
need to be. It's not
yeah.
a it doesn't need to be a huge conspiracy. There could be though.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then we should go into our next question. Okay, here we go. Again from Diliana. Uh, do you think that domestic violence is more frequent among police officers compared to other professions?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know that it is very bad among police officers. My assumption is that the kinds of guys that would beat up their domestic partners, you know, I don't know if it's more prevalent in law enforcement or just more high profile or whatever, but it's definitely a huge problem. I think in law enforcement, you get used to people doing what you tell them to do. And when I was in training, we had a little mantra that my training officer would say, which is you ask, you tell, you make. Meaning, I'm going to ask you to do something. If you don't do it, I'm going to tell you to do it. If you don't do it again, I'm going to make you do it, typically with violence. And so I know a lot of officers bring that home, and have that same attitude where, hey, you can't talk back to me. How dare you? Shut the. And I know they treat their kids like that, and I know they treat their spouses like that. The stat I always see is like 40% of police officers have committed some kind of domestic violence. It's probably higher because it doesn't get
Well, yeah,
reported.
you mentioned the cop who was using steroids a lot. You mentioned that he finally got fired because of domestic abuse, where the SWAT had to come for him.
Yeah, and sadly that's what it took. Is he'd been doing that, to my understanding, he'd been doing that for years, but it wasn't until he tried to hurt another police officer that he got in trouble. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a huge issue because of that. Being a police officer is such a power dynamic. It's such a power dynamic that you take on, and you assume that you're entitled to that power. I'm the boss. I get to make people do what I want them to do, and if they don't, I get to do whatever I want to make them do it. And so, yeah, they definitely take that home. I don't know if more, cops than dentists beat up their wives, but it would
yeah,
not it would not surprise me.
yeah, yeah. Just we don't have those statistics with us right now, but I think there are lots of statistics around about that, the high amount of domestic abuse amongst police. Um, I mean, let's before we go on to other questions, whilst we're on the topic, did you ever feel the stress from your job? Did you ever feel that it was taking over your life with your family and how you interacted with them? Were you conscious
Yeah.
of that, or are you conscious now of it looking back at when you were on the force?
Yeah, I think when I started, I was single, no kids. I got married while I was a young police officer and got divorced basically immediately. So when I was in training, my training officer said, "Hey, you're not really a real cop until you get your first divorce."
Okay.
So
Yeah. So this is part of the institutional culture.
yeah, it's part of it is stress. I don't know that I would have recognized it that way at first, but basically in like where I worked, it was either totally boring or off the rails, batshit crazy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there was no warning. It was just like steady,
No,
steady, steady. Oh shit, there's a
sounds
shooting.
It sounds exactly like prison.
So yeah, so you experience trauma from that. Like you can't rest and relax. You never know when things are going to happen. It made me very paranoid. I couldn't be chill like when I was off duty because I would always be like looking around. Hey, what's that guy doing? Why is he on his phone? What the hell is that? So I was not able to relax when I was off duty, and so yeah, it makes it hard to be a nice, supportive, loving partner when you're constantly on edge and used to getting your own way, used to not having to listen to other people. It doesn't make you a great partner.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it wasn't until after I got out of law enforcement and started to get more into like understanding trauma and starting to really look at like therapy and how I had all this anxiety and depression, stuff like that, that I started to be like, oh, wow, that really fucked me up. Like I was really carrying a lot that I didn't know how to talk about. There's no mental health culture in law enforcement. You are not encouraged to seek therapy or counseling. If you do, you're cautioned to be careful because it might prevent you from getting better assignments. It might prevent you from promotion.
Yeah, that you're unstable.
Yep. You could get if I remember when I was getting marriage counseling for the marriage that was just obliterated early in my career. I asked if I could get that covered by insurance, and the therapist was like, "Well, if we cover it by insurance, I'll have to tell your police department. Is that what you really want?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess not." You know what I mean? Like, so even the therapists were like, "Are you sure you want to let everybody know you're in therapy?" So there's no way to like ask for help. You know what I mean? They don't train you to really ask for help. And
Yeah.
I was part of an incident where a child died in a car accident, and it was really gruesome. Like it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. And it was so bad that the department brought in a therapist, and every officer had to spend 15 minutes with the therapist. And they were like, all right, you've seen the therapist, back to work. We got 15 minutes. So like we went in and the guy was nice and helpful, but it was like, I don't know if 15 minutes was really going to like smooth over a dead child. Like that
Just
was
paying
police
homage
therapy.
to the idea of mental health. Just
Just
ticking a
they saw
box.
it. Yeah.
So back to questions. It's a bit of a strange question from Gurg. When the police arrest pedophiles, do they leave them alone with other prisoners as punishment?
So I was part of an agency that we had a temporary like jail holding facility, but we brought prisoners to the big main county jail in Los Angeles County to be housed. And so somebody like a pedophile, like you're talking about, we would take them there for ultimate housing. And
yeah, here in Bulgaria, we would call that like remand detention arrest. We would call it arrest here in Bulgaria, what you're speaking about now.
Yeah. So the Los Angeles County sheriffs, where we dropped off prisoners like this, they were very famous for a lot of street justice that went on behind the scenes.
Yeah, you mentioned them last time when we were speaking, like when they came along, even you guys were like, what, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah, even city cops like, oh shit, the sheriffs are here.
Yeah.
But I don't. There's like a popular. I don't know if it's a myth or whatever, but like that. Oh yeah, if you're a pedophile, when you're in prison, they'll throw you to the wolves. I don't know if that happened because that happened out of my sight.
After you leave them.
Yeah, and a lot of these arrests, like it will really, if you don't already have a severely low opinion of the justice system, the way that pedophiles and rapists are handled will not will definitely damage your view of the system, because it's really, really difficult to arrest a pedophile if they don't just admit to it. It's hard to prove it. There's a backlog of like rape kits and evidence processing. So unless you can get a guy to say that he abused a child, it's very, very hard to arrest them for it. And it usually takes months of investigation. And so it's not like we just swoop in and see something and hook up the guy right away. It takes months of building a case. And so, it's not like he just gets thrown in with the wolves in the middle of the night. It can take a very long time. So I know that kind of street justice happens. I did not see it happen often. It just didn't happen that way. It took a very long time to get those people in jail, and whatever the sheriffs did to them afterwards, I don't know.
Over here in Bulgaria, I think Bulgaria is in a pedophile crisis. A lot of people in Bulgaria don't even know about this problem. It's maybe one of the most public hidden secrets, well-known hidden secrets, as they say in Bulgarian language. But I was in prison with pedophiles who came from overseas, and they had been invited over to Bulgaria through pedophile ring, who obviously found each other online, and the pedophile that I'm speaking about, he traveled like he went through like 5 airports to get finally to his final destination in Bulgaria, and it was all on one ticket, so it was planned from the beginning. And the police busted down the people in the hotel were like, what the hell are all these little kids doing around? They called the police. The police arrested him with young boys, and he was making videos as well. He said he was guilty. So he got a reduced sentence. I think he got a 4-year sentence for raping children and making child pornography whilst raping them. And then the Bulgarian prison gave him early release for good behavior. He went to light security prison, and then he got early release for good behavior. And the whole time, he wasn't required once to explain or to give the names of the other people in the pedophile ring who brought him over to Bulgaria, who organized for his plane tickets, which city he'd be going to, the hotel, and basically the the pedophile pimps who organized for him to be able to rape children and make child pornography. And so this Bulgarian pedophile rape pimp gang continued during his incarceration and probably to this day. So there's a major problem in Bulgaria with this. Just on that topic, it's a little bit of something that's a little bit passionate to me, that this is a major tragedy for Bulgaria. And it seems to go really high up. It seems to go through the police, prosecutors, judges, and up to the parliament. There's a really massive, powerful ring here in Bulgaria, and they're all looking after each other's backs. And like other prisoners who are trying to fight for reforms and these things, we go for parole hearings, and the director will say, no, he's a bad guy. And then the pedophiles go and they say, he's a good guy, let him free. And then in Bulgarian law, there's absolutely in Bulgarian prisons, there's no rehabilitation for these people. There's no therapy. There's no meeting with psychologists. And after they leave prison, there's no probation. There's no way to monitor these people. There's no way to put, they don't have anything. So basically, when pedophiles go free, they're free to continue what they were doing before they went to prison. It's really catastrophic. It's actually a topic that I'm passionate about, but let's move on, because I can talk about that anytime, but now is a good time to speak with you. So here's a question from Stefan. I don't know if you know, because you're ex-policeman, so I don't know how long ago you quit the police force, but serious question. What's causing the police in San Francisco to stop taking car and theft and small robbery calls? And is that true to begin with? I don't know if you're up to date on, and also you're not from San Francisco as well, but.
No, I worked in the same state as San Francisco. So when I was on, we would handle lots of we would consider small crimes, petty theft. Someone stole my wallet, someone stole my, purse, off my car seat. Up to and including someone stole my car. We had so much car theft where I worked, and a lot of these things.
I like that.
Well, so where I worked, everybody had either an old Nissan, an old Honda, or an old Toyota, and all the keys worked on each other. So it's like,
yeah,
I mean, it was so easy. But
yeah. Well, it's carpooling, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. But the problem is like, or petty vandalism. Somebody threw a rock through my window, or
this is when you were a cop, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, so that happened in my city where I worked, and so those things happen so frequently, but you can't catch anybody for that. Like, you have to catch them in the act. There's no evidence, and no one's gonna bother really investigating a missing wallet that, like, we'll never track that down. And so we'd spend all our time taking all these reports that were gonna never go anywhere. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't surprise me to hear that agencies are finally going like, yeah, we're not even gonna take a report for that. Like, we'll never find it. Like, we'll never catch the person. So I know a lot of agencies are switching over to, like, you just call in and they give you an incident number, and then if your car shows back up, great. Or you get a number for insurance purposes, you can give it to them.
Yeah, it's like drive-through police reports.
But I also know that a lot of agencies in big cities where there's lots of protests and demonstrations, sometimes the police departments will be like, oh, really? You want to defund the police, huh? Fine. Maybe we'll just stop taking calls. And, they kind of try to put pressure on the city that way by saying, like, all right, okay, fine. You don't want us around, we're not going to be around. Because, the movements that want to defund the police want to replace the police with something more helpful. And so instead, what the police do is they just back out, and with no replacement and no resources, the crime gets worse because they're not around. And so they try to do that to kind of like
blackmail
a little bit. Yeah. Blue mail.
Blue mail. So another question. As a policeman, does one become suspicious of everyone around them? Can one switch off the police mode with quotations?
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. You start to, like, the way that I came up and the people that trained me, officer safety was like the most important thing. You got to stay alive out there. And so I was trained by guys like, at any given time, someone might try to kill you. You never know when it's coming. Today might be your day. And they would just drill that into you over and over. And so I remember one of my trainers, he said, like, think about the Olympics. You train every day of your life because one day in 20 years, it might be the Olympics, and that's when you're going to go compete. That's what it's like out there. Is today your Olympics? You never know. And so, like, it sounds silly when you say it, but like, as a young officer coming up, like, these are the guys that you respect. And when you hear it over and over, it's like a cult. You start to believe it. And so, yeah, I would be off duty, and I would, like I said, I would just constantly be like, paranoid, what's that guy? Hey, hey, and like getting involved in things and like sticking my nose in, hey, what is that? And but yeah, I was super paranoid. It's
looking
very
for
hard.
Your Olympics.
Yeah, it could be my Olympics, man. Like, and there's always stories about off-duty officers that stop a shooting or stop a terrorist incident or something. I mean, it's very rare, but it happens. And they're like, oh, am I going to be the guy? Am I going to be the guy that's going to stop the big shooting? And so, yeah, it's very hard to turn that off. And so it's very hard not to see the rest of the public as like a potential suspect, because you never know. It could be your Olympics.
And what about, friends and family around you? Because I mentioned before, last time we were speaking, there was a cop in Australia. He wrote a book called, I think, Filthy Rat is the name of the book. I've forgotten the name of the cop, but he basically, he outed some other cops who were going to murder some drug dealer because the cops were a rival drug dealing gang themselves. And I remember in the book, it was a long time I read it though, long time ago when I read it, but he said something like, when you join the police, you're ostracized from your friends and family around you because everyone's like paranoid that you're a cop and you're going to report them for some minor violation. Like when people have a barbecue or get together as a group of friends, someone will take out a joint and, some people will smoke some weed or something like that. Or people will be speaking about some petty crimes that they're doing, and people are paranoid and afraid to speak about these things around police. So police get ostracized from their friends and family. And then he also mentioned that form of ostracization, which is normal, of course, pushes police more into that, cultural institutionalization and that institutional culture, what we before referred to as like a cult. So, so did you feel that you were ostracized by your community before you joined the police force? Your for friends from school, your family, and
No, so it's I would almost say it's even worse in America because police work is seen as a prestigious, at least when I got in, it was seen as a prestigious profession. It was seen as something cool and honorable. And so you got a lot of praise for it. And yeah, I mean, yes, I did not get invited to the to the weed parties as often, but a lot of officers are perfectly happy to look the other way for friends and family, and to help you get out of trouble. So a lot of times people liked having a cop at the party because if the city cops would show up to break up the party, you just send out the off-duty cop to go, "Hey, fellas, what's going on? Hey, wait, we're both, hey," and smooth it over, And so, yeah, it's something where police get a lot of respect, even when they don't deserve it. And so that's the tough part in America about police abolition and defunding the police, is that everybody thinks of their local cop. Everybody thinks of their cousin who ended up, oh, he's a nice kid. He's a great guy. Or they think of their name. Oh, he's so nice. He mows my lawn. And so we in America, we think oh, he's the nice local guy. It's fine. And they don't see the other side of it. And so I think from my perspective, where the kind of cult thing happened is that I thought members of the public didn't understand what we went through. You don't get it. You don't get what the streets are like out there. Only me and my buddies understand what we really go through. With a thin blue line between order and chaos. You civilians in your warm homes couldn't understand it. When I was a cop, I never got to spend holidays with my family. And it's not because I wasn't invited, it's because I was working. And so you spent all your holidays with your cop buddies.
And of course, the holidays are the busiest times of the year.
Yeah. And so it's sorry I didn't get to sorry I didn't get to have a cake and pie with you at Thanksgiving because I was busy keeping the streets safe. And that's what sort of contributes to that divide.
Keeping the Grinch at bay.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So Pavlin has asked a question here. I think I could even answer this question, but we'll ask it anyway. There are a few cases I've heard about children being shot in the United States from police officers. Are there such cases, or is it made up? So, of course, we're getting the news here through media, through Facebook, through the TV. We're just about as likely to hear some real news as we are to hear about 3G blowing up people's heads because Bill Gates put chips in their hot coffee, which was mixed with a vaccine. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's not specifically about you or where you worked, but in the US, are there cases of police shooting dead fatally children?
Yeah, it happens. It's pretty rare. I mean, our most famous case is a kid named Tamir Rice. He was out at a public park in, I think it was Cleveland or Cincinnati. No, Cleveland, Ohio. He was out playing in a park with a toy, like a water gun, and some asshole.
That was pretty recently, wasn't it? That was pretty recent. Yeah. Oh, was it?
Okay. Was like, hey, there's some black kid with a gun out here, and the cops literally just pulled up and shot him in 1 second. Didn't try to, do anything. They just shot him in a second and killed him.
I remember as a kid in Australia, they stopped selling realistic-looking toy guns exactly for that problem. Yep. And then they started a law that they have to look fake and they have to have red
Yeah.
red things on the end and things like this. And I remember as a kid, it was like really the value of the realistic looking toy guns like really went up.
Yeah.
You were the coolest kid on the street.
And it's funny because they say, "Oh yeah, we put the orange tip on it." And I remember when I was in training, one of my training officers was like, "Yeah, supposedly if they have an orange tip, it's a toy, but anybody could paint an orange tip on a real gun, so I don't even look at that." Like, so for all the good it does, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
that's crazy that he actually mentioned that, because
yeah,
I personally, when I saw the orange tips, like in a moment of panic, it some of them are so small that it could be, you could see the orange or the red tip on it, but like the fact that a training officer, like literally he said, after I recognized the orange tip, I'm still going to ignore it because it could be fake, that's news for me. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so don't rely on a tiny orange tip to get you out of trouble. But yeah,
No.
I would say in the United States, it's it's rare, but yes, police officers will shoot and kill typically teenagers. I can't think of anybody younger than Tamir Rice, who was 12. I mean, he would be an outlier. Typically, it's teens that the police officers will shoot. Police officers will use tasers on kids, which is crazy, but they will do
Yeah.
it. And those don't really get reported or get high profile. But yeah, it's a taser's. I don't know if you've been tased. I've been tased. It sucks. It hurts real bad.
Well, is it true that you have to get tased as part of your training?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So,
So I didn't undergo taser training. I have not been tased, thank God. But there's still time.
yeah, hey, you might get lucky. I don't recommend it, but yeah, it's very painful and very traumatic to the body. And they'll do it to kids because it's considered non-lethal.
Yes.
And it's just
Yeah.
like,
Well, I mean, now they changed the terminology, didn't they, to less lethal, because actually they can be lethal.
Yep. But yeah, it's a real. I would say the issue in America is that Black teenagers are perceived as more adult than white teenagers, and so you will see officers go, "Oh, I thought it was an adult," when it was like a 14-year-old black kid. They're like, "Oh, he was tall, and I thought he was an adult." And
Yeah.
it's that Black kids do not get the luxury of being thought of as children in America.
Yeah, and I know that from watching some documentaries about the United States justice system, where some Black American children, I forgot the English word, minors, some Black American minors, they were tried as adults, and it's more common for underage Black Americans to be tried as adults than it is for everybody else. Another question from Roma Resistance. I don't know if you know, but Roma, do you know Roma are an ethnic group?
Yes.
And so there are problems with the police and the justice system here in Bulgaria, and racism, very similar to that of the United States towards Roma here in Bulgaria. Roma Resistance, as far as I know, is a Roma person from Bulgaria. The question is, are there any mechanisms for tackling and preventing far-right extremism among police officers?
I mean, could abolish the police.
I think the question is more within the police themselves as an institution. Is the state doing anything to prevent far-right extremism? I mean, you can always say no.
Yeah. To my knowledge, there's not a lot being done. I know. So our big in the United States, kind of our big federal law enforcement group is the FBI, and I know that they investigate like white supremacist groups and like the big ones, the KKK, Nazi lowriders, and those kind of like big groups.
The KKK came to Bulgaria as well, by the way. They opened up a chapter in Plovdiv a couple of years ago.
Wow, they're really branching out from the Midwest, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's also strange as well, because I mean, like, what's next? Are they going to let Catholics join?
I know, right? Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, they're going to just let everyone join now, and Slavic people as well.
back in my day,
Yeah, back in my day.
Yeah, it's like there's no mechanism to stop your average city cop who just happens to be some racist asshole. There's no mechanism that prevents them from getting radicalized into their local chapter of whatever, or QAnon. I don't know if QAnon is out in Bulgaria, but it's a huge.
Oh, it's gone everywhere. I
Okay.
don't even know how it works in Bulgaria or in Australia, but yeah, I had to Google it because people kept messaging things like Trump is going to save me. I'm like, what the hell? What?
But yeah, there's a lot of law enforcement has gotten sucked into the QAnon movement. So your nice local cop might actually believe that Hillary Clinton is part of a satanic sex cult that is harvesting adrenochrome from children for use in satanic rituals. Like your average cop might believe that, and there's no mechanism, there's no safety net to prevent people from getting sucked into that, because your local cop is on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram following all the same shitty hashtags that suck everyone else into those things. So
Not our hashtags.
no, of course not. But
No.
yeah, so I wish I had a better, more optimistic answer for that. But yeah, that's why I said like the only mechanism.
Well, I mean, no. The answer is no. There is no mechanism. I mean, the idea. I mean, I guess I don't know. Just thinking off the top of my head, a mechanism would be some type of education courses, training, morality principles. But I guess at the end of the day, like it's a huge problem here in Bulgaria. You know, there's a saying in Bulgaria that the fish starts to rot or starts to stink from the head. You know, from the head down. And so that's a huge problem here in Bulgaria, and I guess it's the same everywhere, where it's the culture of the institution and the leaders of that institution that set so the leaders set the culture of the institution as a whole.
Yeah.
And then if they're allowing things to slide, if they're allowing their staff, it doesn't matter it doesn't even matter if it's a company, a private company, or an NGO or police or whatever, any bureaucratic institution or anything. If the leadership is allowing the discipline to slide, and we're not going to be doing things according to the rules and according to the laws, then that leaves that vacuum exactly for these types of far right ideas and practices to get in, just like any other form of corruption. And so I guess, yeah, that's my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, I would say, I guess all you can do is, I don't know what other groups are doing this out in your neck of the woods, but we've got groups called like Unicorn Riot, and we've got some local Antifa groups that are infiltrating white supremacist message boards and infiltrating local white supremacist groups, and then they are outing the police officers that are part of those groups.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
Typically, a police department does not want the publicity of having the Nazi cop, and they will typically get rid of them. I mean, that's kind of the only mechanism, and that all that does is pushes them out of law enforcement. But
here, unfortunately,
I'd rather do that.
Here, definitely, we do not have that at all. It's the opposite. Like, for example, there was a neo-Nazi professor, Mirchev, in one of the major universities here in Bulgaria, and he is openly espousing like copy and paste neo-Nazi views from Nazi Germany. Jews control the world. Roma are criminals. Foreigners are scum. Basically, he hates everyone except for his own self-identity. And the academic people around him have defended him, and they are refusing to fire him, refusing to get rid of him. I mean, here is completely different right now. Not completely different, but right now the situation is definitely more drastic in Bulgaria because a very far right fascist party is in government, and they even awarded a medal to a Nazi, not a neo-Nazi, a literal Nazi from World War II, who was one of the
Nazi. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, paleo Nazi. Yeah, exactly. So he's one of the originals, and he was a leader of a Nazi group during World War II. and they gave him a medal from the Ministry of Defense to him for his services to the country. Officially, it wasn't for his Nazi activities; it was for something else. But like, that's insane how Bulgaria is going through a situation somewhat like Ukraine, where Nazis from World War II are seen as somehow patriotic or something like that, and they're being rehabilitated by the fascist party who are in government now, the VMRO. But and I mean, lots of police are photographed with doing Heil Hitlers, with Nazi symbols, tattoos. I mean, you could probably find shitloads of Bulgarian police who have Nazi or neo-Nazi tattoos on them, and none of them would be kicked out of the police force for that. Let me go to another question. Okay, so here we have one from Martin, who knows me because we spent time together. Ask him if he will take you to live in the United States. We will pay for the air ticket.
You can come visit.
I think he's asking if you get rid of me, if you bring me over there, so I'm not over here anymore.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, that doesn't sound very reassuring.
My house might be a little crowded, but we could talk about it.
That doesn't sound yeah, that doesn't sound very reassuring. Oh, thanks, Katya. Katya said, Martin Sonev, we don't want to let Jock go. We love him and we want him to stay and live here with us. Martin said some bullshit and we're just going to ignore him. Where's the next serious question, guys? Come on. Okay, Svoboda Nimirova, which in Bulgarian translates to free, like freedom, free Stanimirova. I have a few questions and we'll fire them all out. Hope you guys can cover. So this is a huge question. This is not, it's one of three. Please talk a little bit about why we should never talk to cops. I know this is supposed to be a no-brainer, but for some reason, street education has really taken a hit in the past 20 years, and not all young people know that they should not talk to cops, and some of them do not fully understand why.
Yeah, so one of the police videos that I did when I started making police abolition videos was called Lies I Told as a Police Officer. And
fantastic.
So yeah, if you look me up on YouTube, I got a whole video about it. But basically, cops lie.
Your YouTube channel is in the description as well.
Perfect. But yeah, cops lie all the time because we are allowed to. And we've been specifically told by court cases that we are allowed to lie in the line of duty. Basically, almost anything other than like on an official police report. We're technically not allowed to do that. They still do it, but we're not supposed to do it.
Well, you're allowed to admit that you were lying in the report, aren't you? You said, I lied to, suspect, blah, 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 and that's okay. If you've said that I've lied to them, you're allowed to report it.
Yeah. And so we would do that all the time, and we would lie about everything, up to and including we would tell you, hey, look, you're not in trouble. I'm just trying to figure something else out. And I just wanted to know, hey, what's going on over there? Where were you on Thursday? We would tell you that you were not in an investigation. We would tell you that we're not investigating a crime. We would tell you that if you tell us the truth, then we'll let you go. We would tell just anything to get you to spill your guts. We would say it. And so, as part of don't talk to cops, because police will use anything against you if they can. You never know what they're really investigating or what they're really trying to prove. And you don't know what words they're looking to hear to trigger something that will get you arrested. And so the best thing you can do is just say, I don't talk to cops. I don't answer questions. Am I under arrest? Great. If I'm under arrest, I want my lawyer. I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I don't know what the rights are in Bulgaria, but over here, if you are being, if you're under arrest, if you're not free to leave, then you are entitled to a lawyer, and you're entitled not to answer questions until your lawyer gets there. So
that's a really interesting topic for Bulgaria right now, because the European Court of Human Rights, I believe, although probably there's like a whole group of people who want to shoot me right now for getting that wrong. But there is some European directive that is requiring Bulgaria to make that the same situation here, because right now the problem is that there are two laws. One is the Criminal Investigative Codex, NEPACA in Bulgarian, and the other one is law for the police. And the problem is that Europe has said once somebody becomes a suspect, they have to be under what you say in America, the Miranda rights. You know, once somebody becomes a suspect, they have to have they have to be informed that they're a suspect. They have to be given the right to a lawyer, the right to be quiet, and the right to shut up, and blah blah blah. And the thing is, in Bulgarian law, there is no such word as suspect. So every time this happens and goes to court, the Bulgarian judges look up the national law and they say, there is no such thing as suspect in national law. You are, for example, they play with the words, you're a person of interest, or you're detained, you're a detained person, or and the problem with that is that Europe has said anyone who is in this position of being, as you said, restricted from leaving, they are, and also the other problem is that they've also said that anytime somebody becomes a person of interest, from that moment, they are suspects. But because the word suspect doesn't exist in the Bulgarian police law, they, like daily, they arrest people for 24 hours. So the police are allowed to hold people here for 24 hours if they have a suspicion. But the irony is that they're not suspects. So they don't give you, they deny you access to a lawyer. They deny you access to a phone. They don't tell you any rights, and they just say, they just lie, like you were mentioning before. They say, you're not. I mean, when I was arrested, they said, they tried to question me, and I said, look, I'm not going to speak if you without a lawyer. And they said, but you're not charged. You're just here answering questions. Like, we could let you go any minute. And I said, okay, so you have two choices. You can either let me go, or you can get me a lawyer. Let me, if I'm not charged, let me go, or charge me and get me a lawyer. But yeah, it's a big problem in Bulgaria, and it became more publicly known about this problem when there were massive anti-government protests in this last year, and the police just started mass arresting people at the protests, and then people started working out in Bulgaria things don't work like in American movies where you get read your rights and you have access to a lawyer and you get access to a phone call. So that's also a problem for us in America and Australia, is that a lot of people know their rights. They know their rights from Hollywood, and the laws, of course, are not universal. So let's see what the rest of the question was.
Yeah, well, I would go back and just say no one has ever stayed out of jail because they talked to the cops. So to your viewers, I would just say no one talking to the cops has never kept someone out of jail, and it has definitely never helped them stay out of jail. So just don't talk to cops.
Yeah, watching on Netflix, the amount of documentaries about innocent people going to prison because of speaking with the police is just mind-blowing. And I had an argument with a good friend of mine who said that only Bulgaria can have these problems, convicting innocent people and things like this. But if you've got Netflix, then definitely the problem is not just here in Bulgaria.
Yeah, what people don't understand is that police officers are trained in interrogation, and we know how to get people to admit things or confess to things that they didn't do. We know how to confuse people, to stress them out, and people will confess to things that they didn't do because of really manipulative interrogation tactics. So you might think like, oh, I've got nothing to hide. I've never done anything wrong. But it's like, it doesn't matter. We know how to confuse you and get you to admit to things. So just don't do it.
So question number 2 from Svoboda Stanimirova. Please give advice to those of us who have friends and family who are police. How do we speak with them about what they do and why they should quit? And that's actually a question that I had written. So fantastic question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, like I said, in the United States where I live, police work is still considered, even now, even after all these protests, is still, if you live in a white neighborhood, if you live in a wealthy neighborhood, police work is seen as prestigious and honorable and heroic. And so, and it's an identity, you know what I mean? It's like it's something that people are proud of. Like I had to work really hard to become a police officer, and I was really proud of myself for passing all the training and passing all the tests. And so it was something that made me feel really good about myself. And so if you're going to talk to somebody and say, all cops are bastards, defund the police, abolish the police, you should quit. Like, okay, those things might be true, but you are asking somebody to get rid of a part of themselves that they are proud of, that makes them feel good, that makes them feel important, that makes them feel
It's their identity.
yeah, like they're helping. You know what I mean? And it's a part of my identity. Oh, I'm helping the world. I'm contributing to society or something like that. So, yeah, I think I mentioned, I think in one of my previous videos, I'm totally in favor of saying stuff like abolish the police, even though it's extreme. But I also understand that if I'm talking to a family member who's in law enforcement, there's a whole other piece of that message that I got to get to. And so for me, I think the way that I think about it, or the way that I approach it, is like, look, it doesn't make sense that the person that we expect to enforce traffic laws, take a report for a missing wallet, find a kid who ran away from home, and help somebody who's off their meds and having a mental health crisis. It doesn't make sense that that person also needs to be the guy with the assault rifle taking down bank robbers, also the guy busting up, drug dealing, drug labs, and taking down pedophile rings. Like, why does that all have to be one person doing all of those jobs? Like, that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't help that person do any of those jobs very well if they can't focus on just the one thing. And so for me, the way that I talk about it is, hey, the way that we think about law enforcement today is wrong. We're making a few people do all of these important jobs. So what if we build different resources so that, the officers don't have to do all these other things and they can focus on just the dangerous things? It's sort of how I try to talk about it, in terms of like, hey, because like when I was a cop, I always thought it was weird that one minute I'm investigating a gang execution and the next minute I'm investigating somebody's lawnmower got stolen out of their garage. I was like, that's weird, And like in my city, healthcare was really, people could not afford healthcare. They could not afford mental health care. And so there was a ton of people that were not bad people. They needed medication and they needed therapy and they needed help, and no one was helping them. And so the same officer that's going out to beat up gangsters is going out to talk to people that have schizophrenia or have PTSD or have some other issue going on. And to us, they look exactly like the gangster. You know what I mean? And so we go out and we're like, hey, that guy's acting crazy. Let's beat him up and take him to jail. It's like, that's not what they needed. Arguably, that's not the gangster either. But you know what I mean? It's like, so the way that I approach it with friends and family who still revere law enforcement is like, hey, this system is not working. We all know that this isn't working, right? Like, it didn't make me feel good to go out and beat up somebody who is having a mental health crisis and drag them to jail where they're just going to suffer. Like, that didn't make me feel good, even as a cop. Like, even then I knew, hey, this is not helping. So why don't we
You haven't said it yet, but do you think that these measures are actually more detrimental than? So you've said it wasn't helping, but would you say that it was actually detrimental to society?
Yeah, if you have somebody living in poverty, and it causes them stress and it causes them trauma from living in poverty, and they start to self-treat that with drugs or something like that, by stripping them of their freedom, throwing them in prison, taking away their ability to get a job, taking them away from their family, is that going to help them get off of drugs? Throwing them in a hole, telling them they're a piece of shit, taking all of their dignity away, that's going to get them off of drugs? Of course not. If
Yeah.
somebody has PTSD from their upbringing, from something bad that happened to them as a kid, stripping them of their dignity and throwing them in a hole isn't going to treat that PTSD. Like, that's only going to make it worse. And you, as a agent of the state, is only going to make them more suspicious of, society or polite society or whatever, because you hurt them too.
Yeah.
A lot of these,
I've been in prison with these people. I've been living with them for 12 years, and my perspective of it is absolutely the same as yours. Although I would go even one step further. There are people who went to prison without drug problems, and they were so depressed whilst in prison that they actually started drugs in prison and became addicts in prison and left prison as addicts. So I mean, that's a whole different kettle of fish about the prison system. But I mean, if people are coming out addicts who were not addicts before going in, what chance are there for addicts who go in?
Yeah, we used to call prison criminal college, because somebody would go in for a low level offense, get hooked up with one of the
Really, that's strange. We used to call the police the same thing.
It's true. I mean, people would go into prison and get hooked up with the gangs, and if society has told you that you're a piece of shit and has thrown you away, and this gang has come and said, "Hey, why don't you come work for us? I can get you money. I can get you whatever you need." Like, why wouldn't you? Of course,
Exactly.
why,
That's fantastic that you mentioned that, and it's amazing that you recognize that, because that's one of my own observations being in prison, is that the social labeling and pressure, you're a murderer, you're a thief, or you're a drug dealer, it's so hard and negative from not just the police, but the justice system in general, judges, prosecutors, the newspapers, society, you're scum, you're scum, you're scum. And it's so heavy that basically the person has two choices. One is to commit suicide because they can't live with themselves, that they're hated. Or second, to I just forgot the English, but it's to take that label and make it your own. So that's why so often people in prison, they get their crime tattooed onto them, murder, or drug lord, or king of thieves, or something like that. So so society and the justice system is pushing this negative identity onto these people, and instead of course, instead of us as a society saying you're a normal person who did a shit thing, and that shit thing doesn't define who you are, you can change your behavior, or maybe it was a mistake, or whatever. Instead of that, the criminal, the person who's going to prison, sees there's no way out. You're never going to be forgiven. You're going to be labeled like that for life. And so you have two choices. You can either have an existential crisis and blow yourself up, or you can oh damn it, I forgot the English. You can basically own what they're calling you, and you say, yeah, you know what, yeah, I am a thief, I am a drug dealer, and what, I like it, it's good, and yeah, that's exactly what you were just saying now. I'm amazed that you also had this same experience.
I mean, it took me a long time to understand that, because cops, when I was in law enforcement, I mean, we talked about people in these kind of essentialists. He's some fucking addict. He's some fucking dirtbag gangster. Like, in my the first video that kind of went viral for me on my channel was about how when I was in law enforcement, we dehumanized the public, and we would say stuff like, fuck him, he's just a gangster. You know what I mean? Like, a gangster would get killed in the street, and we'd be like, fuck him. Like, that's how we talked about people. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing, which was stripping these people of their humanity in my own mind so that I could do whatever I wanted to them. I didn't have to care about why they were there, what circumstances led to their being there. And it took me a very long time to change my own mind about it, and to I still struggle with that. I still struggle to delete that programming that I put in my brain. And I'm somebody that participates in these projects now of abolition, and it's still hard for me. It's got to be 5 times as hard for the average member of the public who just reads the newspaper, just sees the news, or reads their Facebook news, doesn't have to think about those people over there. Oh, that's those people over there. and it's not. It's your neighbor. It's your friends. It's, you know what I mean? Like, it's people living right next to you that maybe made a bad choice, and society is just writing them off. And so it's something that we're dealing with in the United States right now, where there's a big debate over should felons be allowed to vote. We don't let people who are convicted of a felony vote in presidential elections.
Yeah,
And it's
that's actually a big issue here, that prisoners in prison are not allowed to vote according to the new so-called democratic constitution from the 90s. And that's actually in contradiction with the European Court of Human Rights, which says that everybody has the right to access to democracy. But we don't have such an extreme problem where former prisoners are still prevented from voting.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, so in America, we're like, oh no, jail is for rehabilitation. We're sending you there so that you know what you did wrong and you can come back out. We want you to rejoin society. You just can't vote, and we're not going to give you a job, and everybody's going to call you a piece of shit. But we
And
want you to
we're not
rejoin
going to let you
society.
own a legal gun.
Yeah, and it's like, why would somebody want to rejoin a society that doesn't respect them?
Absolutely,
You know?
and I think that's one of many points about prisons not allowing prisoners to vote. It's like we're trying to teach people, we're trying to teach people to be social, and we're desocializing them. For me, it's just a conflict of terms. Let me get back to the questions. We got like loads of questions, and I think we're not even going to have time for them all. Svobodna Stanimirova, I'm not going to ask your third question because it's going to be really long, and we've asked two of them already. If we have time, I'll come back to it at the end. And then so we go down questions. So Dilyana, if police get abolished in context of capitalism, do you think the rich will hire private militia to protect them? So actually, that's what Svobodna Stanimirova asked. That was her third question. So we got to it anyway. So yes, so the question also what Svobodna Stanimirova asked was, do you think that if the police disappeared today, that the police and rich people would create basically private police?
Yeah, they have those now.
Yeah.
They exist today. We've got the Pinkertons is the famous one in the United States. They break strikes. They
Sorry, what are the Pinkertons? Can you explain
Pinkertons
that
are like
for?
it's like a private police agency, meaning
I
it's
mean,
not part of the
it's a
city.
security. It's a security,
Yeah,
private security.
like private security, but they have a long history in the United States of strike breaking. So when the miners would go on strike in the United States, the mine companies would hire the Pinkertons to break the strike, beat up the strikers, beat up labor organizers.
Well,
So the
that's
Pinkertons,
of course the historic origins of the police, at least in the United States.
yeah, that and slave patrols.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there are already private police forces and private militias and private security. Blackwater was the big one in the Iraq War. Those were private ex-military contractors that, you would send Blackwater to go do things that you legally couldn't send the US military to do.
Of
Well,
course.
they all live here in America, so they're all looking for work. So, and a lot of these guys will do anything for a paycheck.
Yeah, and it's one of the ironies that just blows my mind, that the fakeitarians, as I call them, the right wing, ultra right wing liberals who believe in a perfect world of capitalism without a state. It's like there's nothing more tyrannical than the private sector. So actually, when states want less accountability, they contract out this work to private companies, and it blows my mind how anyone could think that a private company would somehow be more democratic or bring about more freedom than a state. So I'm going to looking for the next question. Angela Dean said yes, the gel guns, I think they want to say toy guns. The toy guns are now banned in Australia because they look so real. Stanimirova again repeated. So maybe whilst I'm looking for the next question, we can go back to Svobodna Stanimirova's question. Please talk. about police abolition and how do we make sure that once we defund the police, we actually abolish the police structures and ties amongst ex-police officers. I'm worried that they will ultimately form right-wing militias with or without money from the government. So you answered that a little bit already, that there already are such private security organizations. So then from your personal belief, your beliefs, how do you see a way of getting rid of police as we know it today? What would take its place, and how do we get there?
Yeah, so I think for me, yeah, so I did a whole video kind of recently on police abolition, and one of the sources that I looked at was a website called criticalresistance.org. They had a lot of material that I used in my research, and one of the authors said, when we talk about police abolition, it's helpful to think about what we want to build rather than what we want to destroy, because I think police abolition and prison abolition and psychiatric abolition and all the other abolitions that we're all interested in, it all hinges on, we have to have something in place. We have to have something to catch, people that, let me start over. I'm thinking through this, the criminal justice system has a lot of people who have been abandoned, who have been cast aside, who have been rejected, who have been just thrown away like garbage. And so, one, we want to build a society that doesn't do that to people. But two, if we get rid of the prison system and the police system, all of those people that have been treated like garbage, we need to help them. We need something to catch them and help them come out of that. And so, I think of mutual aid programs. People got to eat. You think of your basic human needs. People need shelter. They need housing. People got to eat. They need clothing. People like to work. I'm an anti-capitalist, but people like to work. People like to do things and create and and so I'm not saying everybody.
Yeah, of course. I don't think any anti-capitalists are against the idea of working.
Right. Yeah. You and I know that, but unfortunately, it's people. Oh, everybody's just gonna sit around all day in socialism. I'm like, no, that's not what we're saying. But people want to do something meaningful with their life. People want that dignity, and they want that. They need community. People are social creatures. We need to be part of a community, be taken care of. And so, I don't always know exactly, what the structure of that would look like, but I think, we're going to need to provide free healthcare to people, because there's a lot of people that need a lot of healthcare and a lot of mental health care. And we're going to need to do that in a way that
isn't socialism, man.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're goddamn right. It is.
What?
And we're going to need to provide that healthcare in a way that doesn't mimic the carceral system that they're coming out of. So we can't be, strapping people down and giving them lobotomies and shit like that. You know what I mean? We got to actually care for people. We're going to need, work training programs. Let's train people to, I really love video editing. I think it would be fun to train people looking for work to do video editing. I think that'd be, it's a cool gig. You just need a computer. Anybody can learn how to do it. I think video editing is a great skill. Anybody could learn. Like, great, let's train some people to do some video editing for all the great YouTube videos that are out there. You know what I mean? Like, let's train people to do construction. Let's train people to do home repair. Where I live, there's an electrician shortage.
This is in connection with former police to retrain them to integrate into society. Or
yeah, sorry, I was working up to working around to that. But yeah, so when I think of police abolition, I think of all the things that we have to build to catch all of these people coming out of the criminal justice system. So in terms of
it's for the criminals. It's for the you're speaking about the criminals without the uniforms.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to work up to is that if we are building a society that is going to take care of the people that are coming out of the prisons, the people that we're reintegrating back into society, I want to believe that that society that we're building is also going to be beneficial for the former law enforcement, for the people that also have an identity that has been damaged by the criminal justice system, the people that are suffering and have a bad view of society because they were on the other side, because they were the cops, because they were, the torturers. Some of these people are going to need some accountability. Some of these people are going to have to be accountable to the communities that they terrorized. But a lot of your rank and file cops, a lot of your just low level guys on the streets, yes, we're going to have to retrain them into jobs. We're going to have to give them something to do. They're going to have to be able to feed their
They're going to
family.
have to become workers.
Yeah, they're going to have to become part of the the working class again. And in my view of police abolition, and I don't know if every other abolitionist would agree with this. It's a diverse movement. I don't necessarily see a day that there will never be a need for somebody with combat training to intervene in something to stop a crime. Maybe in fully automated luxury communism, we'll all just go into Star Trek and there will never be crime again. I hope so. Fingers crossed. I don't necessarily believe it. So yeah, I believe that there are some.
I mean, in Star Trek, they still have crime because I'm a fan of Star Trek, and they threaten them with prison, and they say we don't execute. I mean, the biggest advancement in Star Trek is that they no longer have the death sentence, which a large part of the world hasn't had for 30 years.
Right.
But because Star Trek, of course, is American, for them it's like, wow, we don't have death sentence anymore. Wow, it's space, man.
Yeah.
But they
I guess
definitely
it's true.
do
Even the
mention that
Enterprise.
they still have prisons.
Yeah, even the Enterprise still has jail cells.
Yeah, the brig.
Yeah, they still got the brig. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know that we'll ever. I hope so, but I don't know that we'll ever live in a post-crime society. So yeah, there may be need for people that have special training to go in, intervene. Hopefully they will do it non-lethally. Hopefully we can, do it with de-escalation, all these other things. But yeah, there may be opportunity for former law enforcement to apply those skills in a healthy way and not in an oppressive way.
This was actually a major problem I was reading about in the United States: rainbow festivals, rainbow meetings, rainbow gatherings, whatever you want to call them. And I was reading about it. Are you aware of these rainbow gatherings? You aware of the philosophy and ethos of it?
Are you talking about like LGBT pride or
No. Rainbow is basically original hippies meeting together in like woods. And okay, so I mean, yeah, you should check it out. Like the idea of it is some type of anarcho collective, but it's only like for a week or a month, and it's self-organized. Like a group of people will just in the old days it was word of mouth, and then when the internet started it became more organized, and now there are Facebook groups. But I've been to a few of them myself, and it's really cool to go there and check it out. Like, of course, I could complain about it for days and days, because that's just who I am. I'm never as one of the directors of Sofia Prison said, I'm eternally unsatisfied. But one of the problems that they had, I was reading about some years ago, in the United States, was when a man who came to the Rainbow Gathering had committed rape against some of the other women, and then basically no one knew what to do, because the ethos of the gathering was like not to judge anyone, not to harm anyone, and also the other one of the other principles of it is try to separate yourself from the state and from controlling bodies. And they didn't know what to do. Should they make courts? Should they punish the person? Should they get rid of them? How do we do it? And I think in the end of the day, I don't know if it was a decision or if just a small, or if a group just did it on their own. But I think in the end they had to give the rapists to the police, because they just didn't have any clue on how to deal with this situation, this crime within their so-called lawless and anarcho society. So yeah. We got so many more questions. Let me put one up here from Angela Dean. And we don't have, I think you can stay for another half hour, right?
Yeah, I can do till about 9:30 my time.
Okay. So, in your police training for entry into the force, how do they train you with drawing your gun, shoot to kill? I'm not sure what that says, or assess the situation. So that question is from Angela Dean on Facebook.
Yeah, so our firearms training in at least in American law enforcement is you shoot to stop the threat is how we would say it. However, in our conception of using force, firing your gun is always lethal. There's no such thing as shoot to wound. We don't try to shoot a leg. We don't try to shoot to hobble you. Because if you think about it, you can't really control where a bullet goes. I mean, you can kind of control where it goes, but like if I shoot you in the leg and it hits your femoral artery, you'll bleed out and die. Now, well, I didn't mean to kill him, so shooting your gun is always lethal. Ideally, you are showing up, assessing the situation, seeing what's happening, and only using force when it is absolutely necessary. But practically speaking, and most of the guys I knew, if something seemed dangerous, their gun's already out. We were always trained to err on the side of officer safety. So, like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, our mantra was, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. That's a little saying that we had, meaning I would rather take my chances with a jury of 12 people than be
I think
carried.
that's made it into Hollywood. I think that's made it into a few movies because it sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, I'd rather be judged by 12 jurors than carried by 6 pallbearers in my coffin. So we will take our chances with using lethal force. But yeah, in American law enforcement, if your gun is out, you are shooting to kill. And
that's what going back to the question, that's what you're trained to accept and to understand, that this is a death shot.
yes, correct. We
have-
train to shoot right here. That's where we train to shoot.
Yeah, body hit. It's the mass, because I think someone, what's his name? Who's your new Lord and Führer? He just lost his.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. No, Joe Biden didn't win. I thought Trump won. So we have so Joe Biden. I think sorry.
I said, careful. You might, you might attract an audience you don't like saying stuff like that.
I'm hoping to get sponsored by Trump. So we have a question here from. I think Joe Biden said something like, "We can try to train the police to shoot at legs," or something like that.
He's an idiot.
So Georgi Dimitrov asked a question, which I think is a little bit difficult for you to answer completely, because it's like, what's the context? What does good mean? Good is a subjective word, and in this context, like, are we asking what is good for the police in terms of are we like, what gives the police more power and control and money, or what's good for the police in terms of control and transparency, which eventually leads to a better society, which means we have better police. So I don't know. You can interpret the question how you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking who's helped the police more, it's an interesting question, because Donald Trump's whole philosophy that he ran on and governed with was that there was a golden age in America when life was good and people were safe. And don't you wish we could go back to that golden age? And so what Donald Trump gave the police was like philosophical aid. He created a movement that revered strength and revered power, and using that strength to go backwards. So if you want to know who did better for sort of the philosophical side of the police, I would say Trump. But if you want to talk about who actually helped the police in their day-to-day jobs, Obama presided over an unprecedented militarization of the police. The Obama administration sold war vehicles to small towns in the United States. So some dinky town out in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest of the United States might have a tank because of things that the Obama administration did. So, you know, it's like, and the Obama administration lent the legitimacy of law and order to the police. You know, under a liberal administration, it's like, oh, the system's working. This is how the system's supposed to work. But I mean, people forget that Black Lives Matter, that protest movement happened under Obama, because it was under Obama's administration that police became more militarized, oppressed their communities more and more. You know, so Trump is only the natural outgrowth of what the Obama administration was doing. And I think liberals don't like to think about that, but Trump was inevitable coming out of Obama.
Yeah, I think that's my personal belief that the far right wing reaction is definitely symptomatic of the democratic, way of doing things, not answering the issues that need to be answered and just pissing everybody off even more. I have another question here. I think it's a good question from Flo. Have you been pressured by your superiors to hide what happened during an operation? Have you been prevented from acting ethically? So that's a really great question. Thanks, Flo.
Yeah, there's for sure a culture of protecting the police department and protecting your fellow officer. I remember one time we had a sergeant that I was working with that got in trouble for something. I can't remember what it was that finally got him in trouble, but the people that investigate police are called internal affairs. And so this sergeant got in trouble for something and he was all upset about it. And so he was in our police briefings and our meetings, he would just complain about internal affairs and say that they were fucking with him and talking all kinds of shit about him. Well, I got called into an internal affairs investigation because they were investigating him again for trying to fight against the first investigation. And so they asked me, said, hey, this sergeant, did he ever talk bad about internal affairs? Did he ever say that we were, not treating him right or whatever? And I was a young cop at the time and I didn't know any better. And I was like, oh yeah, he's so mad at you guys. I thought it was funny. Like, he was talking all kinds of shit about you guys.
You bastards.
So, I didn't say he had done anything wrong. I was just like, oh yeah, he's so mad. And boy, he's in. And well, I got out and I went back with my training officer and they said, hey, did internal affairs investigate you for what the sergeant was saying? And I said, oh yeah. And he goes, well, what'd you tell him? I said,
everything.
I just said he was complaining about the investigation. They're like, dude, never talk to internal affairs. Never tell him anything. Don't ever. And I was like, why? I didn't say the sergeant was doing anything wrong. I just said he was complaining. And I was like, doesn't matter. You don't know what they're investigating. You should never cooperate with internal affairs. You didn't see nothing. You didn't hear nothing.
It's ironic, isn't it? Because it's the advice that we're trying to give people, don't speak with the police. And then it's the police advising the police, don't speak with the police.
Never talk to even cops know never talk to cops. But yeah, so that's a small example. I was never pressured to cover up anything more serious than that, but that was the culture and I knew better. You know what I mean? So it's like I didn't need more pressure.
It's the vibe for your rest of your time there.
Yeah, so kind of the way that we did it, it was more just like, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I don't know. I was looking the other way. I was looking at my phone. That's kind of how we, I don't remember was a big one.
Oh yeah, I'm used to that. I mean, here in the prison, there's video footage of 6 or 7 guards going into one cell. So 2 prisoners go in the cell, walking in, 7 guards walk in, and then 7 guards walk out, and the other 2 prisoners are brought out, one in a wheelchair and one on a stretcher. And 7 police reported officially that they didn't see anything, they don't know what happened. Yeah. Like, and I mean, like me personally, I think all of those police who gave those statements, I think it should also be some type of law for this as well, for missing video footage. Like the minute video footage gets deleted or like, and it's clear that it's been deleted and not just like it wasn't recording or something like that. The minute that happens, the people in charge of that should be punished, or the person accused should be acquitted or whatever. We have another question here. We have so many questions. I haven't even gotten to them all yet. So, Milen Gogov, how easy is it to become a cop in the USA? So, yeah, I think that's a really great question, because there was also a meme going around about, it was like a female police officer in the United States, and she had her cop certificate, and she said, I just finished my 4-month course, and now I'm so happy I passed it, and now I'm a cop in Eddie, in whatever county. And then someone replied under it, wow, that's amazing. In Sweden, it takes 4 years or something. I think it was Sweden. It takes 4 years to become a cop. Wow, it must have been so hard for you, or something like that. So yes, how easy is it to become a cop in the USA? How long is your training period before you're accepted?
Yeah, for those who don't live in the United States, we're called the United States because we have 50 states, basically 50 regions that are somewhat autonomous in how they do things. And so depending on which region you live in, that question is different. But typically, you don't need a college degree.
Well, speak about the state where you were,
Yeah. So in the state where I was, California.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, right. In the state where I worked in California, you did not need a college degree. You were required to have about 1,010 hours of training to get your certificate to become a cop, which was either
how long?
1,010 hours, which translated to either 10 months part-time or 5 months full-time.
Okay, wow.
And we were one of the longer ones. We were 1,010 hours was one of the longer states state requirements. So typically, I would say on average, it takes about 6 months of training to become a cop to get hired somewhere. And then you're on training for about a year where you're on probation and they can fire you or whatever. But it's pretty easy. If you can spell, if you can read and write and spell, and if you can run for a little bit and jump over a 6-foot wall, it's pretty easy to become a cop. And we had people that couldn't do those things, but it's not difficult, and there's not a lot of there's pretty stringent background checks and stuff like that, and there's a psych eval, but a lot of weird assholes become cops, so that psych eval does not do very much.
I just saw Skylar is here commenting, police and thieves in the streets, oh yeah, scaring the nation with their guns and ammunition. So I just want to shout out to Skylar, and thanks, Skylar, because of Skylar, me and you, we met.
Yes.
Yep. So let's go to the next question. If you was told to watch. Oh, here's a interesting question. If he was told to watch 24 hours, from Milen Gogov, if he was told to watch 24 hours Jeffrey Epstein in prison and something went wrong, who is responsible? It's not really relevant. You weren't a prison guard. No. But I just thought it was funny to bring it up.
I mean, the serious side of that question is that's part of what is insidious about how we do criminal justice, is that nobody is responsible. You know what I mean? Like ultimately it's the sheriff or the chief, but those are political positions. You know what I mean?
In United States, they're voted, right? Because here they're not.
Yeah, they're voted, or sometimes they're appointed by the city council, who are voted in.
Okay.
And so it's like, talk about, that's the problem in these hierarchical structures, is that responsibility gets diffused, and so any one person is like, oh, I was just doing what they told me to do. I don't know anything. You know what I mean? So it's like, who ultimately is responsible? Who ultimately gets held accountable for those things? Often it's nobody, because no one person, you can't demonstrate that one person gave the order usually, or it's very difficult to do that.
We have a big comment here, and I think they ran out of space on Facebook in the comment section to actually ask the question. We get what's your, but I liked I just wanted to put it up because the information was interesting. From Mikhail Altemak. In my country, the Regional Syndicalist Federation has no real stipulations against membership for people membership of people in repressive trades, for example, police. It is, however, up to the local federation whether to accept or reject applications or bar someone from membership. In the 80s, this union was also the majority union among prison wardens, criminal health rehabilitation workers, while at the same time being the majority union among prisoners in one of the largest Swedish prisons. And then the question is cut off. But I think in terms of unions, you had mentioned before previously when we had talked about the police union, and maybe you can just comment a little bit about how the police union is working and really what their goals are, what they're doing. Are they constructive? Are they defending the rights of police officers, or are they just kind of like a smokescreen to protect dirty and corrupt police?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. It's police unions, so every agency will typically have a different police union, and then there's been some attempts to create kind of like umbrella unions or whatever, but like Los Angeles County, Los Angeles, huge city, huge powerful police union. New York Police Department, huge powerful police union, and they are big political actors. They collect money for donations. The police union, not just their endorsement, but the dollars that they donate can determine who gets to become mayor, who gets to become city council. And so they politically prevent officers from being held accountable. They prevent police reforms. And then in the day-to-day, they prevent and protect officers who've been accused of wrongdoing. They help them get out of trouble. They help them beat their cases and things like that. And they do things like threaten work stoppages. They call it blue flu because technically police are not allowed to go on strike. So they all just use their sick day at the same time. Like, whoops, we all got sick on the same day. Whoopsie. So they do a lot of what you would expect a union to do for workers. But as I always mention, police unions are not worker unions because you call the police to break strikes. You call the police to hassle labor leaders. So these are not legitimate unions, in my opinion. They are protection rackets for violent state agents. So yeah, they're very powerful in the United States. And they are, anytime somebody tells me, oh, we should just reform the police, I'm like, great, well, get rid of the unions because they're going to fight you every step of the way. And they have millions and millions of dollars to contribute to politicians. So good luck.
Yeah. So here's a good question that I like. Some of the other questions that I've got here, they're a bit repeated of what we were speaking about earlier in the conversation. So just in case I haven't gotten to your question, it's probably because it was earlier in conversation. We don't have so much time to go over everything twice. This one is from the person's name is a little bit a little bit on the border of how we're going to pronounce things. Hey, good looking. What you got? I presume cooking, although it could be, hey, good looking. What you got cocking? I don't know. Like whichever side of the fence you're sitting on, it's up to you. Free will. Can you touch on how cameras help or don't, and can they police the police? And how is it possible to tackle corruption in a police force that is paid so little? Are officers inclined to look for bribes? So that's actually a really good question, because also in Bulgaria we have this problem with very underpaid police, and that's always used generally as the excuse for why the police here are so corrupt.
Yeah. So where the agency that I worked at, we got paid pretty well, and in other agencies, near me in California, I mean, we got paid very well, actually, especially with overtime. But I remember during Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, New Orleans Police Department was one of the lowest paid police departments in the country. And they had cops walking off the job. They had cops looting. They had cops just, stealing with everybody else because they're like, I make peanuts. Why? Who cares? Who gives a shit? So
yeah.
But back to the camera question, it's interesting. I had family members that worked as internal affairs and reviewed camera footage, and I want to say they told me 90% of the time camera footage was used to exonerate a police officer or to prove that the officer was justified or it was used against the citizen. So yes, in theory, cameras are good about holding officers accountable, but the vast majority of time footage is used to justify what the police officer's doing. And I think that's because a camera does not capture all of the context that leads up to a crisis. You know what I mean? So you on the camera.
I'm not going to presume that the police are always in the wrong in every situation.
Sure.
So the way you just explained it now is that the way I got the feeling from it was that if there's video footage of the police doing something, it's always going to prove them. It should always prove them wrong because they are always wrong. So I do mean that video footage is manipulated in a way to show that the police was correct when otherwise they shouldn't have been correct. Is that what you're?
No, it's just that. So it's like if you see somebody in. So I'll put it this way. A video footage will show a guy standing out in the middle of the street with a baseball bat, screaming and yelling, and the officer coming up and shooting him. And you go, okay, that's a good shoot. Guy had a weapon. He was out of control. It doesn't show you that this guy was off his meds. It doesn't show you that this guy could have been talked down. It doesn't show you that this guy was failed every day of the week before that day by the same society that then sends up the cop and shoots him. So it's like the footage gives you a snapshot in time that doesn't necessarily capture the problem. But yeah, theoretically, you know,
I think for a lot of countries in Europe, I mean, these things happen. They happen all the time. People get shot for nothing. It happens a lot. It happens a lot in Bulgaria, and it's covered up a lot. Like it's not even spoken about or known. But I mean, I was in prison with lots of guys who said I was stealing a car or I was stealing something, but it's like something small. You know, I was stealing $50 or something, and the cop started shooting at me, and I only escaped with my life because I ran around a corner and the bullets were hitting the corner, and then I jumped, you know, in a garbage bin or something and escaped. So these things happen a lot where police open fire on suspects or alleged suspects, and then I have one friend actually in prison who, when the police came to arrest him, they started firing at him. And he didn't know who was firing at him, and he took his pistol. He was a criminal, and he had an illegal gun with him, and he started shooting back. He started shooting in the sky because he thought it was another group that were coming to shoot him and kill him. So he started shooting in the air, and he didn't know it was police. The police obviously, you know, they hit the ground hearing the gunshots because they didn't know he's shooting in the air, and he escaped. And they gave him 30 years for that, for attempted murder of the police, even though he never shot at the police. They shot at him. So these things happen all the time. They happen in Bulgaria. I'm not going to say they don't. However, it is generally illegal for the police to shoot people unless the life of the policeman is in immediate danger. So, for example, the example that you gave, a man standing on the street with a bat, by law, in a lot of countries, that would not be considered legal to shoot that person because the life of the policeman is not directly threatened. So, I mean, is that different in the state where you were an officer, or is that yeah?
It's so yes, that's technically the standard, that you can only use lethal force to defend your life or the life of someone else. But juries and judges are very pro-police in the United States, because when you think of every TV show is either a cop show or a doctor show in the United States. Like every movie has good cops, every TV show has good cops. You know what I mean? So it's like in the United States, we just assume that the officer's telling the truth and that they're acting in good faith. And so when it comes time for court, judges and juries tend to go, oh yeah, the officer acted reasonably. What was he supposed to do? He must have been in danger, because the officer will say, oh, I feared for my life. He had a baseball bat. I told him to drop it. He didn't drop it, and I shot. I feared for my life. And judges and juries tend to go, yeah, okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
So I got to take off here. Actually, got to go to
we've
work.
got so many more questions, and we just don't have time for them all. I'm sorry, everybody. But thanks so much, that dang dad. Thanks so much, and I hope that you'll come back. I hope that we can continue these talks, and I didn't even get through half of my questions.
Well, let's have to do it again then.
Yeah, thank you very much, and goodbye everybody who's watching, and thanks for all the comments.
Yeah,
Ciao.
sure. Nice to meet y'all. Have a good one. Be safe.
Ciao, ciao. And that's also goodbye from me. Almost 2 hours speaking with that dang dad. And thank you all very much for watching and commenting and asking questions. It was really great. And this is my second stream so far, and I hope it's the second of many more to come. Thank you very much.